right, so a few months ago, my wife said to me that she knew somebody who might make a good fit for an Authors at Google presentation. And so I took a look at Susan's book, and I thought it would fit really well into some of the giving back stuff we do here at Google, and the kind of giving back culture. And I also thought it was kind of timely because it kind of fits in with the whole service initiative thing that President Obama is pushing right now. So Susan Skog is a humanitarian 6-time author, and her most recent book, The Give Back Solution, Create a Better World with Your Time, Talents, and Travel, is a great combination of stories of giving, insight into why helping humanity is part of all of us, and a guide to enriching give back opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Susan Skog to Google.
Thanks, John, and a huge shout out and note of gratitude to you and Heidi Dormady for bringing me opening the door at Google for me. I'm grateful and have been really excited about coming here, and it's such a great fit because I've been a Google groupie for years as an author. As you know, many of us who have been authors and writers and journalists for some time used to go to the library and spend hours, sorting through data. And now that I can do far-flung searches of obscure things around the world, I cannot tell you how much better I squeak through my deadlines. So it's a great pleasure to be here, again, being a Google groupie. So it's quite fun. And thank you again, John and Heidi. There's a strange, interesting, wonderful phenomenon happening around the world that I capture in the Give Back Solution. For the first time, we've never seen such a critical mass of people who have fallen in love with and really care about people who've been off our radar for far too long. That we've never seen so many people who decided that it's not only a mind-blowing adventure and experience to reach out to people around the world, but that it's a great privilege. And so there's this humanitarian tipping point, so to speak, underway of people who decided, like Google, that they can't not go out and do more to ease whether it's poverty or disease or technological shortfalls or environmental issues around the world. And so we're seeing this mass of people who've decided that this really is what they want to do. Bill Draper, the head of Ashoka, a nonprofit that promotes social entrepreneurs across the world, says we're experiencing what he calls the most profound historical transformation in the structure of society since the agricultural revolution. He said we're seeing a shift from a world led by small elites to a world where everyone's a change maker, a global society. And that's, again, what I capture in my book, that we're seeing that there's this wonderful convergence, for example, of for-profit businesses like Google embracing a nonprofit or a social change mission. And even 10 years ago, many corporations didn't have a service program. They had no give back program. They had no volunteering program. And they're rushing now to go through that give back door because, as you know, employees are coming forward and saying, I want to work for an entity that makes a difference in the world. If it's a choice between your company and X company, I want to work for the guys that are doing some goodness in the world. And we're also seeing it's boosting retention, it's boosting job performance. People who volunteer and give back, whether halfway across the world or in their own backyard, tend to be more resilient, they tend to be more adventurous, they tend to be out-of-the-box thinkers. And so we're seeing that huge phenomenon. Plus, there's customers are saying, I saw a survey recently that said close to 80% of all customers of a specific industry felt like companies have to do more to give back, and those are the guys that they'll be supporting. 71% of professionals in a recent survey said giving and service aren't just luxuries to engage in when the country is prosperous or a company is profitable. So what's going on? Why are we seeing this incredible rush to give back? That's one thing I wanted to get beneath in my book a bit to explore it. And many people are saying we, for the first time, really are seeing people around the world who need clean water, who are living in poverty, who are suffering from AIDS. We're seeing for the first time that ordinary citizens are that tipping point. We've waited for too long for sluggish aid organizations. We've waited too long for big governments to make a big enough difference. And so there's this grassroots sense that ordinary people really are hungry to step up and make a difference because they know that an accumulation of small gestures, whether it's going on a volunteer vacation, which close to 100,000 Americans will do this year, according to estimates. Or what you're doing, using your technologies and using your acumen to make a difference around the world in the ways that you can. We're also seeing that many people, myself included, are drawn to the idea that we can sit at the feet of the world's people and learn from them. I find that incredibly enticing and incredibly rewarding, because I think that we have a lot to learn from people around the world about what it means to be a human being, what it means to live a rich life. And I'll share some stories from the incredible women in Uganda who I met a couple of years ago. As part of my book, I interviewed people. What I love to do and why Google is so instrumental to my work, I love to reach out to people and find out what their experience is. I like to kind of crawl inside the heads of people who've done the kind of things I write about to find out how it's transformed them and how much fun they've had with it, for example. Talk to people like Orrin Penn, who's an international tax partner at Price Waterhouse. And Orrin went to Orissa, India, to spend time with some of the untouchables there to help them get first-time clean water and try and look at ways that they could boost their income far above the poverty level in terms of doing some small entrepreneurial things. And Orrin said seeing people living well below poverty was overwhelming. In some communities, people felt so ignored and put down that when we first met with them, they'd put out 3 chairs for us in the room, and the untouchables would sit on the floor. And so Orrin said, at first we didn't understand. He'd say, well, you know, why would you think that we were going to be sitting on these chairs? And they said, why would we not sit on your level, which Orrin and the volunteers did? And the untouchables would say, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And Orrin said, because we want to treat you like the human beings that you are. And so he described how spending time, weeks with the untouchables, figuring out how they walked miles to water holes, how they actually were struggling to stay alive, how they were so resilient at having stayed alive. It really sparked in him this desire not only to keep reconnecting with the people of Orissa, but also to sort of up his game at Price Waterhouse. He said it really allowed me to reach higher and be more of a team player and be more of a change agent, right, within my corporation. So his story's in the book, and I think it's phenomenal. He said after a while, when they ended up sitting on the same level with the untouchables, people who were malnourished and timid and physically weak, when they came through the door, when they started like sharing stories about the untouchables, would say that to Orrin, well, what do you do on the weekend for fun? What's your world like back in America? And Orrin said once we started sharing stories and opening up about what our mutual worlds were like, there was a huge transformation, and people who came in ill and weak left laughing and much more vibrant. So Barack Obama has said, I love this quote, President Obama has said, we have the power and the passion to make the world anew. And that quote I would have loved to include in my book, because that's the vibe, that's the theme, that's the thread that runs through my book, that ordinary people have the power to make the world anew. And I show, as John mentioned, dozens of people who are giving back and doing their piece to make the world anew, dozens of nonprofits doing beautiful work to try and renew the world, and many entry points, whether you want to do a volunteer vacation or whether you want to engage right from your computer to do virtual coaching of somebody, a returning soldier from from Iraq, for example, or if you want to support a microfinance enterprise in Indonesia, ways that you can engage right from your computer or from your kitchen table are in the book. I think right now what we're also seeing is that there's a spike in volunteering. In spite of the downturn in the economy, there's an uptick in volunteering right now. And many people are saying this could be the best stimulus package that we can imagine, because many people are drawn to volunteering and giving back. They find that it helps them feel better and more connected to a community. It sharpens their skills while they're looking for work. It helps them make themselves more appealing to a prospective employer, because when they give back, they're still honing great skills in internships and in volunteering. And many people have said, for the first time, I have this window of time. I know I'm going to be reemployed, but I have this window of time, and I've always wanted to give back. And that's a huge momentum we're seeing right now in the country. Many people have said, for the first time, I'm able to indulge my passion for making a difference, and so they're doing so. Volunteers really are the best face of our country, said David Caprera, who's the head of the Building Bridges Coalition. If you'd like to see what's happening in terms of some momentum in some institutions, the Building Bridges Coalition is a powerhouse of about 180 organizations, from Habitat for Humanity to the State Department to Microsoft. It's something Google might want to consider joining if you're not part of it already. It's a group that's coming together to say, hey, we really can renew the world and renew Americans and bring out the best in Americans by giving back. And so they're promoting volunteering. And the Building Bridges Coalition is behind the Service Act, which was just passed recently. The exciting part that I find is that people are finally thinking bigger, like as Google has always done. You guys have always had that passion for innovation. And many people are seeing for the first time that they can be big thinkers too. And so they're thinking big, really big, and saying stuff like, if we can get a latte into a far-flung corner of the world, why can't we get more bed nets? Why can't we get more clean water? Why can't we get more small businesses cropping up? And they're using that kind of out-of-the-box thinking to make it happen. And they're also saying we can't wait again for proposals and documents to come through. Larry Brilliant said, for Google, dying people can't wait for some 20-year plan. And I think that's the impetus, that's the momentum that I really see woven throughout my book. I'll share a little bit with you what I think will take this to an even greater tipping point. And it was echoed by the dozens of people I interviewed for this book. We absolutely are and can go head to head with poverty, with AIDS, with the need for clean water, with the need for greater schools for young girls in Taliban country, in Afghanistan, Pakistan. But unless we take it to notch it up to an even higher level by bringing together our brilliant minds with our brilliant hearts, I don't think we'll have the impact that we really want, because the difference that I see in a lot of the people I've interviewed is that if we can go and make an impact with people, if we can have what I call a people-powered philanthropy, in which we're not only delivering our brilliant solutions, but our passionate hearts and the desire to really connect and make meaningful connections with people around the world. We can't go to that higher level. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity that we have as to whether we're extending a small microfinance loan, whether we're going in country to deliver a technological solution in partnership with the community, or whether we're just engaging by raising our voice for change. If we can connect with people on that personal level and find out what their needs are, what their dreams are, what their hopes are, and I think many nonprofits now are seeing this, instead of just broadcasting their results, they're sharing stories of people whose lives are transformed by philanthropy. And I'll share a bit now for Beat for Life. I wanted to walk my own talk. And instead of just writing about people who are connecting and writing about philanthropy and writing about engagement, I wanted to do it myself. And so 2 years ago, it was a perfect juxtaposition. Many of you who have teenagers can relate to this. Our oldest son was rebelling, not a pretty picture, ready to vault out of the nest, and doing so in a very uncomfortable way. And at the same time, I was really hungry for more marrow in my work. I wanted to take it deeper. And I think there's a lot to be said for listening to that angst and that give back call, because it often leads to something greater. And so I decided that I had been doing some volunteering for Beat for Life. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Beat for Life. They're basically based here in Boulder. It's a rock and give back nonprofit. They are supporting about 600 women in Uganda, many of whom are HIV positive refugees who fled the conflict in the north. They're supporting these women who are beading jewelry, incredibly vibrant, visual aid jewelry, out of recycled paper, the only resource they had, and they're selling that jewelry across the internet and in bead parties around the world. And Beat for Life, as I did some work with them, they had a desire, again, to take it deeper, to have a connection made, to have someone like myself come in and sit with some of the beaders and gather their stories and find out what led them to this place in Kampala, Uganda. How did they come there? Why did they flee? What did they flee from? What were their hopes? What were their dreams? And so when I had that chance to go to Uganda, I absolutely grabbed it and spent time with these gorgeous people of Feed for Life. One of the people that, she still stays with me, and I'll read a passage from the book. Her name was Rose. And Rose was one of my interviewees. And when she walked across the red-baked clay in Kampala to the small Feed for Life office, I had been told that she was an HIV positive woman who had been living in poverty, who had been struggling to stay alive. And so I didn't imagine this vibrant woman who came walking across the red-baked soil in this gorgeous gown, and she said, "Look at me, I am a rich lady." And in talking to Rose, that same enthusiasm came throughout her whole presentation. She said, "Before I joined Feed for Life, I looked like a lady of 80, she said, and she would suck in her cheeks, very expressive. She sucked in her cheeks, and she hunched her body to illustrate how gaunt she once had been. But when I met Rose, she radiated good health and hope, looking like African royalty in an elegant gold-trimmed, vivid rose-colored gown. Rose knew she had something big going on. Feed for Life has brushed the dust off my soul," she beamed. Rose was not only vibrant again, but she had just opened her first ever bank account, was now able to send her 4 children and her sister's 3 children to school. Her sister had died from AIDS. Only a few years before I met her, Rose was rising at 5 o'clock in the morning, begging in the streets for money to try to support the children. Now she was a force to be reckoned with, and she knew it. She was well aware that a mountain of misery was perched just above us in the hillside slums of Kampala, where thousands of people struggled with malaria fevers, despair, and AIDS. Her home was once miserable too, she said. "But now if you come to my house, you would see we are a very happy family. You would think you would stay 1 hour, and 4 hours later we still would be together, laughing and clapping." And these, you can't see them possibly in the room, but she had these gold shoes that glittered on her feet. To me, they were like a symbol of this new foothold that she had in life. And when she floated across the red earth, the air shimmered around her, I wrote. I felt myself shimmer in her presence, and I felt alive and firmly grounded in the world in a way I'd never felt before. "Thank you for not sitting on your soft chair in America and letting us die," Rose said. And Rose reinforced for me something I'd always believed, but I'd never truly felt until that moment, that we are here for each other. And I felt myself more grounded in a way that I'd never felt before. I felt myself come home to myself, and I knew that this was the kind of work I wanted to do more of. It was just an amazing turning point. So when I came back, it was such an infectious moment. It was such an exhilarating time in Uganda. I didn't want to take my finger out of that give back socket. It just felt like this jolt of electricity I wasn't willing to turn off. And so I started interviewing people who do more give back work. I started gathering stories of other people to find out how it changed their life when they decided to do some nonprofit work or do some volunteering. And many of the people are doing the work in their own backyard. I mentioned many domestic opportunities and many domestic volunteers. Like I interviewed my nephew in Iowa who filled sandbags when the Mississippi rose several years ago in Iowa City. He talked about how it rocked his world when he filled sandbags. His name is Scott Tribby, and he described what it meant to him to really deepen his connection with his Iowa City community by filling those sandbags as the rivers were rising and as the town was flooding. I also decided that I wanted to find out a bit about why this became a lifestyle for many people. And lo and behold, dug into the sometimes unpredictable health benefits. Many people decided to volunteer not to improve their health, but then they would report afterwards that their chronic pain was eased, their arthritis was eased, their depression was eased, their anxiety was eased, their sense of despair was eased. And there's much of that too that comes about. I interviewed some incredible people who were just in our own backyard. Have any of you seen the interviews with Michael J. Fox recently as he's talked about his new book coming out? Michael J. Fox, of course, suffers from Parkinson's, and he has this new book out about the adventures of an incurable optimist. He traveled around the world and interviewed optimistic people, and people asked him in these interviews, well, what's your lifestyle? What gives you juice? And he said, there's a song that runs through everyday life, and I like to tap into that. And the people I interviewed for my book not only know there's this song that runs through everyday life, but they want to hook up their amps and amplify it and let it rock out. And one of the cool people I interviewed, he's in our own backyard in Denver, Noel Cunningham and Tammy Cunningham, who own Strings Restaurant. And they've catered to the likes of Bill Clinton and Mick Jagger and other high wattage people who come through Denver and eat at Strings. And so their food is gorgeous, but what eats away at them is the fact that kids in Ethiopia and kids in America don't have enough to eat. And so they've launched the Cunningham Foundation. Tammy said she went to Africa to see for herself too, to make that people-to-people connection I talked about. And Tammy said, before I had no concept of starvation. My mind just didn't allow me to go there. But she went in 1998 to help deliver donated medical equipment and supplies with Project Cure, another Denver-based nonprofit. But seeing the face of poverty, Tammy Cunningham said, like one little boy with leprosy begging for medication galvanized her. Noel and Tammy went back over again in 2001 with Project Mercy, which puts up schools in Ethiopia. And Noel said he was staggered by the starvation, but he was struck by the resilience of the people. And that's that resilience I keep hearing people say they learn from themselves when they see people in the developing world. Noel said some kids orphaned by AIDS were living in a cowshed, but they were at least grateful because they had a cow to keep them warm. That's the same kind of gratitude I kept seeing with the women of Beat for Life. They were constantly saying, look at me, how rich I am. And many of them, they would have under $100. But they would celebrate all day long because they had that $100 and because they had a 10 by 10 foot house. Some of the kids now are sleeping in clean beds because of the Cunninghams, and the Cunninghams also decided that they've got to do more to give back in their own backyard. So every Mother's Day, for example, they open up the restaurant, they open up Strings, and they feed women, elderly women who have nowhere else to go. And Noel talks about just what a cool feeling that is. He said, how cool is that? We see them eating brunch, we feel the love of volunteers. I can't do that when I'm dead. And so another major momentum right now is this whole idea of giving while living. Many donors are saying, I want to see the impact, man, when I'm here to enjoy it. I love this idea that I could not only watch it, but I could maybe be engaged and get to know some of the people that my philanthropy is benefiting. And so right now, in my sense, giving back really is perhaps the best stimulus package that we can invest in, because it is amping up that song that runs through everyday life that we often can't hear. It's really boosting people's optimism. It's totally jump-starting our hope in the economy and our hope that there can be a brighter day for everybody. And I think as we see that the world is so much more interconnected, Google, of course, knows that in spades. Many people are just now discovering that. When people tap into that idea that we are interconnected, they can't not give back. So I'll close with, and look forward to a conversation with you guys, close with just a bit more about why many people are finding that they can't not give back right now and why it's got to become almost a lifestyle for them. Giving back doesn't mean you don't get anything in return. Helping others reach for a new day rejuvenates us in ways that another margarita-soaked vacation, more stuff, a fatter resume, or a supersized house can't begin to. We want to feel useful. We want to find meaning. And we want to know we matter. We want to feel this alive and on fire with possibility. What could your piece of this give back movement be? The entry points for engagement are exploding and reaching out. What could yours be? Ultimately, it's about how to find the right match for your passion, whether that means volunteering while on vacation, reaching out to local nonprofits with an international reach, or tutoring kids in your own city while launching a startup company in the developing world, or donating medical supplies and aid in your own community. My Give Back solution tries to capture this renewal of optimism and idealism and hope sweeping the country, and it demonstrates the amazing impact that everyday volunteers can have. And this is the phenomenon. It's not the big aid organizations. It's ordinary people, you, me, our neighbor down the street, our aunt in Ohio, the kids at school. I have a 7-year-old in my book, Morgan Atwell, who implores her friends, don't bring me birthday presents, bring me pennies on my birthday, because Morgan pools those pennies and she donates them to Pennies for Peace to put up schools in Pakistan and Afghanistan. That's the kind of idealism that we're seeing. Whether that means you gallivant and give back, whether that means you make a contribution with your time, your talents, your resources right in your backyard, it's totally everyone's choice. Whatever you choose, you can profoundly affect a piece of the world and rock yours in the process. And it's a blast to talk about this topic. Thank you again for bringing me here. I would love to show just a few more images from Bead for Life, and then we'll open it up for questions. These are some of the women who came. I was there walked on a bead sale day, and I picture huts, again, 10 by 10 foot huts in the slums of Kampala. No movement, it was silent, and all of a sudden women would come from their huts with these gorgeous, vibrant dresses, with children often on their backs, with baskets, handmade baskets swollen with the jewelry that they were so proud of. I kept saying I felt like I was dropped down in the land of the shiny people, because the light just streamed from their eyes. They were so on fire with the idea that they knew that they were working their way out of poverty, and that they could for the first time send their kids to school. They could for the first time have 3 meals a day. They could envision another brighter day. And this is the Bead for Life office where the jewelry was dried before it was shipped to the States and around the world. These are the Cunninghams, Noel and Tammy, who I mentioned, who support Project Mercy and have their own foundation, the Cunningham Foundation. And that's Alice. When I talked about, I'll close with a quick story when I talked about what we have to learn from people in the developing world, for example. Alice was someone I totally connected with. On one day we were coming back from a bead sale, and we were sitting in an old car that hurtled us down the hillsides of Kampala from the slums where we'd been. And Alice and I were hunkered down in the bottom of the car, and on the base of this, literally on the bottom of the car, because there was no room to sit in the car. It was piled full with other people. And Alice would just start laughing at the adventure that we were in. And I learned so much patience from her too, because she was always happy, she was always laughing. And one day I was waiting for, we Americans were so impatient, there was a tiny copy machine, and I was waiting at the Bead for Life office one day for my copy to spit out. And I kept trying to yank it. And Alice would just start laughing, and she said, "Wait for it, sister. Wait for it, sister." And she often had these little asides and these little digs, and she would just start laughing. And I found out later that she had had this horrific life. Her husband was killed in front of her by someone with a machete. She was HIV positive. One of her children was HIV positive. But she was always saying things like, even if you hurt me, I'll not put you in my mind. And so the sense of forgiveness was amazing. And she said to me many times, hope is back on me, because they were very literal about the idea of hope, that hope is back on me. And I think about the people in Uganda and people I met in Thailand when I did a volunteer vacation in 2007 too, and I think that's my hope for any kind of give back opportunity, that it's not just you don't do it out of an obligation, don't do it out of responsibility, do it because you can't not, because it rocks, because it feels great. And that we let people in, whoever we impact, that we let them impact us, and then we've got something unstoppable. When we let other people around the world impact us, then we've got a force for good that's truly unstoppable, and that's my hope. So I'd love any comments that you guys have, or any questions. I would love to hear about maybe some of your give back opportunities and give back moments.
I have a question, I guess, about the Beads for Life. You mentioned a lot of the women there were HIV positive. Is that almost everyone there was?
A majority, yeah.
One thing I've heard frequently about Africa is that they have a lot of disinformation, even in the governments, about this cause of HIV and AIDS. Is that something you saw while you were there, or is that?
Yeah, there's a huge stigma still. It was interesting when I was there because some members, some officials of the government were coming through. I went to a hospital too to see because, long story short, Torkin Wakefield, who's one of the founders of Beef for Life, her husband, Dr. Charles Steinberg, was an AIDS doctor there at the same time. And so I went with Dr. Charles, as they call him, to a hospital in Kampala. And it just turned out that there were some dignitaries coming through, some bigwigs through the hospital to see some of the AIDS treatment because Dr. Charles Steinberg and others had worked to lift the stigma, to build this sense of community. And for the first time, people who were HIV positive felt like they could actually speak out and not only seek treatment, but kind of do some advocacy in the community. There's still a huge stigma. Some of the beaters I met, they not only have been infected by their partners or their husbands, but then they've been kicked out, literally kicked out onto the streets, and basically left to die because they had no money, no means, no home, and kicked out with the kids a lot of times because they were HIV positive.
Do they know how they got HIV, or what is it? Are the causes?
There's still, I think it's better understood all the time, but there's still definitely some confusion about it. But it's because Uganda has had more information, and I think they've been more progressive than some other countries in terms of the public education and information. But there's still a lot of misinformation, and I think that the stigma was what I saw more than the misinformation. And there's still, like, at the time I was there, the government was still not advocating the use of condoms. This was during the Bush administration. There's a lot of misinformation about that, if not obstacles to access to condoms. So it was very fascinating. A lot of the women would describe over and over how once they found out that they were HIV positive, they not only were kicked out by their husbands, but then they were persecuted really by the husband's entire family because they had dishonored the family. So it was so beautiful to see some of these same women who described that horrific ordeal of being kicked out and living on the streets, not knowing what they were going to do. When I was there 2 years ago, they were just breaking ground. The women had come together and they purchased a piece of land, gorgeous piece of land with mango trees and birds overhead on the outskirts of Kampala, and they were just starting to build homes with Habitat for Humanity on that land. And my understanding now is Torkin Wakefield is a great person if you want to connect with her in Boulder and on their website. But my understanding is they now have built like 110 homes on that land. So it's just a fabulous success story. And again, the women still get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but this time they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because they're making money, they're planting their gardens, they're getting kids ready for school. It's incredible. And you think about that, I mean, that's just one story. You think about just that one story rippled out by tens of thousands, if not millions, because Beef for Life was started by 3 ordinary women. They just happened to be walking through the slums of Kampala. They noticed these gorgeous beads that one woman was sitting on the ground making. Her name was Millie. And they asked Millie if she had any other beads. And so Millie ran into her hut and she walked back out and she had beads around all her arms. From then on, it was launched. It's really cool. Anybody else? Any other questions? Comments?
I'll share one. You asked about Uganda and AIDS. There's a great GIS website that shows the spread of AIDS coming out of Kenya and following the truck routes, and how many of the men that were driving trucks were carriers of that disease, and how that over a period of time lapse, the spread of that disease as it was measured in kind of a GIS-based system. Very, very graphic, very interesting to see. It's a different culture and it's a different set of practices that they have there, and yet, it's prolific. It's catastrophic.
And so the grassroots, I think the grassroots action that's happening, it's just going to keep exploding. One event I want to share with you, it's going to be happening May 2nd, and I'd be grateful if you could help spread the word. It's called Dying to Make a Difference. And what we're going to be doing, I'm teaming up with a group called Dining for Women, and we're going to ask people on May 2nd, we chose it to come close to Mother's Day but not fall right on Mother's Day. So on May 2nd, we're inviting people to dine together, whether that's pizza in your living room around the coffee table or a brunch on the beach, and we're asking asking people to dine together on May 2nd, and then to pool the money that you all would have spent dining out and funnel that to 6 hunger and poverty relief organizations. And it'll be on my website, susanskog.com. We're just announcing that this week. So we think it's just going to be a great grassroots effort. And again, the whole idea is to show it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a weighty obligation. It should be natural and fun. And it can bring people together to do something like that. So it'll be May 2nd, Dine to Make a Difference Day.
I guess I do have another question.
Yeah, please.
All right, so you did a lot of research over a lot of different types of programs, I'm guessing, and you're exposing in the book a lot of different opportunities and ways people are helping. Do you have any intuition or feelings about like what type of assistance you think is probably most effective? Like it's vacationing there and doing humanitarian aid labor essentially, or financial aid and it's one of these microloans, or the donating to established charities, or whether it's more informational or educational. Like what types of initiatives do you think have probably the greatest impact in your mind?
That's a great question. I've thought about that a lot because one thing I really wanted to do with my book is to really show the traction. You know, let's just don't have idealistic rhetoric and say that, you know, the world's coming together. I really wanted to show the traction, to show the impact, to show that AIDS, malaria, clean water, and all these issues really are. And so I think that is the question right now that we all need to be asking. And I think one thing that struck me is that there's a lot of great groups doing phenomenal work, but they're not talking with each other. And so the information sharing alone is a huge opportunity right now, because there's many nonprofits doing fabulous work, but they're not connecting with their colleagues, with their peers to share the knowledge pool. And so I think you know, information gathering, I think there can be more online summits. The Clinton Global Initiative has sparked a lot of that. Gates Foundation is sparking a lot of that. You guys are sparking a lot of that to get the dialogue more open and more transparent, so that whether we're trying to come up with a malaria vaccine or whether we're trying to get bed nets into communities, you know, what's the most effective thing? But then the second thing I think is education. We've got to get, you know, the tipping point will be Nelson Mandela and Muhammad Yunus, and so many people have said, to keep that tipping point going, we've got to get the girls in school more. The girls have to stop carrying water. They need to start carrying school books. So any efforts, like 3 Cups of Tea, Greg Mortensen, anything that gets the girls in school and gets them educated will make the big difference, because then money is saved when you start educating the girls. Money is saved more freely in a society because women in those cultures tend to save money more. And then the cycle of poverty starts being busted more. So anything that really promotes education. And again, there's a lot of things we can do. You don't have to travel in country. Many people don't want to. Many people don't have the means to. But there's so many things you can do to just support that with small donations or with tutoring. You can do online tutoring to kids in the developing world if you want to just do it from the kitchen table.
You had some connection with, I noticed, with Engineers Without Borders. Can you talk about that a little bit? And I kind of want to continue on that thread, because there are so many organizations, and when you get involved with certain ones, how do you suggest getting involved with one, or how do you do that search? Do you have any, leads on, other than follow your heart or follow something that would mean have some personal connection with you?
Yeah, I discovered how do you answer your give back call, and I think that's the first piece, is to know that there could be a call. I say in the book, ask yourself, what have you always been drawn to doing? Because many people know, whether it's really feeling like it's unfair that there's so many unemployed people in America right now, or whether you're drawn to getting clean water to small villages the way Engineers Without Borders does. And Heidi, if you want to share anything too about EWB. Engineers Without Borders, I worked there as a manager until recently, and they're working in 47 different countries to get developing water, to get clean water and renewable energy and sanitation into the communities. And so I think one of the first things I recommend for people who are trying to figure out what they want to do is ask yourself, like, Barack Obama said, we have the power and the passion to make the world anew. What is your passion? And then I recommend like going to, there's certain websites, for example, like I love the Case Foundation's website because they really look at what's happening. They look at trends in the philanthropic world. They look at what's trends in volunteering. They highlight a lot of different opportunities to give back. I love Fast Company's website too because they'll highlight a lot of socially conscious organizations. And so read a little bit about some of these organizations and see if you agree with their mission. And you can, sometimes they'll post their traction on their website. And that's one thing I really highly recommend is it's easy to pop up your philosophy and your mission statement. But if you're going to align with any organization, I really recommend that you ask them what their impact's been. Ask them to document their impact. Ask them to show you how effective they have been and how they do it, what their process is. Most nonprofits now really realize that they've got to be more accountable and they've really got to show the impact of what they do. And then kind of get a feel for the people. Ask yourself too, I think one question a lot of people are asking themselves is, do I want to volunteer because I want to connect with other people? And so if you want to connect with other people, maybe you want to do something again in your own backyard because it's a kick to get together. And like Project Cure, you can meet at a collection point and help package up for an hour a week lightly used medical equipment that goes into Ethiopia and around the world. So, if you want that sense of community, definitely look at that too. But Charity Guide's a great website for really looking at nonprofits and what their performance is. Anything you want to add, Heidi?
Was it Charity Navigator?
Charity Navigator.
Is that the one that rates all the nonprofits? It's really helpful to see what their spending is like.
Yeah, totally. And there's enough on the internet. Once you start researching it, you'll often find volunteers blogging about their experience with a nonprofit, of course, now. Volunteer vacation groups, if you want to do a volunteer vacation, again, Building Bridges Coalition is a great place to look. I did a volunteer vacation with a group called Eye to Eye. Another fabulous one is Cross Cultural Solutions. There's Global Solutions. There's Globe Aware. There's no shortage. Voluntourism.org is a great website for looking into that too. Any other questions?
I was just actually going to follow up on your previous answer and sort of, I would have answered the question a little bit differently and talking about passion sort of went in that direction. That it doesn't really matter if what the world really needs is teachers. If you're a crappy teacher, that isn't what you should be doing. It really is, I think, fundamentally about what's the passion, what's the thing, and because teaching will be a burden if you suck at it. Right? I think the first question is, what's the passion? What are you drawn to do? What do you really want to do? And then impact is a really hard thing to measure. I think it's important to know what the impact is, and it's important to be clear for yourself. How do you want the impact measured? We built 100 schools, but there are no kids that ever go there because they're too far away from the communities. That's not really impact. So I think the theme of the book is really cool. This idea of that it's fundamentally about the person-to-person connections, and that impact is about impact on the individuals together at the other end.
And certainly, I totally agree with what you're saying. And certainly, people in the developing world want us to approach them in that way, because it sure as hell isn't about saving souls. I say in the book, reasons to give back, reasons not to give back. Don't do it because you want to save somebody's soul. From what I can tell, the souls are awfully fine around the world, and we can learn from them. And don't give back because you want to pad your resume or feel good about yourself. Definitely that'll be a side benefit of it. But I think, if you approach it from the standpoint of, man, what a privilege and what a cool opportunity to get to know people and learn from them. I mean, I can't tell you how many things I've learned from the women of Thailand, or women of Uganda, and also the women from Thailand. But the women from Uganda, I could have had a tape recorder running constantly with the things that they shared with me. And a lot of it was just gratitude, we've been somewhat of serial movers. You know, I've moved like, 7 different houses in the last 12 years, always trying to feel better about, that next house. And the women of Beat for Life were just constantly saying, oh, look at me, how blessed I am. I have a house, and it was, again, a 10 by 10 foot hut that's stoked in the hot sun. And so I just learned so much about gratitude. So, yeah, it's just, but I think, everybody's give back call is going to be so unique. But I think there's no one prescription for it, and I think just kind of playing with it right now is a lot of fun. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much for coming, and again, big gratitude for having me. I enjoyed it very much.
Thanks.